Mock Draft Monday is back, and so am I. First of all, a huge thank you to everyone for your patience. As many of you already know, I did have a family passing. My grandmother passed away this past month. She was my last living grandparent, so it really was a tough stretch for me. I took a break away from YouTube, and now I'm looking forward to getting back into it. So first of all, a huge thank you for all of your guys' continued support. I had a lot of great messages, a lot of nice comments toward me, wishing me obviously peace for both me and my family, and then also just a lot of love from the community. So I really do appreciate you guys. It does mean a lot. I'm excited to get back into it though here with this Mock Draft Monday, a March Madness special. And we've had a fun March Madness so far. Now I know there haven't been as many crazy upsets, but there's still been a lot of good college basketball. I've been extremely excited to record this video. And if you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content. And now for this mock draft specifically, first of all, the draft order is based on the standings as of Saturday, March 22nd. Obviously, it takes a couple of days for me to put together this mock draft. It takes a couple of days for me to put together the order and really think through where I want the prospects to land and what really makes the most sense, especially as stock changes so drastically this time of year. You know, a player has a great game in March, it does mean a little bit more than a game in November or December. So that obviously factors into this video here as well. And then I want you guys to comment right now down below your favorite 2025 NBA draft prospect. Now, it doesn't have to be the guy you think is the best. Cooper Flagg, for many of you, that's who that answer would be. But I just want to hear your favorite one. I'm going to be leaving those little hearts on every single one of those comments today, so make sure to go comment that down below right now. First overall, the Washington Wizards are on the clock, and I don't think there's a lot of surprise. There's not a lot of confusion about who the first overall pick in 2025 will be. If you go back to my way too early mock draft, the day after the 2024 NBA draft, I said Cooper Flagg will be the first overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft with a 99% certainty. And now that we are just a few months away from that actual draft, as long as he comes out of the draft and actually declares for the draft, which I'm very certain he will, the Washington Wizards first overall will select forward Cooper Flagg from Duke. And there is a lot of excitement for me about this pick. Yes, it's the obvious pick. It's the no-brainer decision here. Everyone in the world knows Cooper Flagg is going to be going first overall, but I don't want to just fly through this pick. First of all, Wizards fans, you deserve the commentary on this selection. And then secondly, I just love to talk about this fit specifically. Cooper Flagg to the Washington Wizards. Why does it make so much sense? And we're going to start on the defensive end of the floor, where I am very, very excited. If you go back to my draft commentary last year, I was one of the more optimistic people around the 2024 NBA draft. As everyone else called it a weak draft and kind of a disappointing draft class, I was very optimistic long-term about the upsides of several players, one of them being Alex Sarr, who ended up being my number one overall player in the 2024 NBA draft class, very narrowly above a few other prospects in that class. And the reason I was so excited about Alex Sarr is the defensive flexibility, versatility he could provide for an NBA franchise. And I think for Washington, so far as Sarr has had some breakout performances recently offensively, it has been kind of a struggle season for him on the offensive end of the floor. But I think Wizards fans specifically have seen glimpses of that potential long-term defensively. And I think the acquisition of Cooper Flagg into the defensive frontcourt trio of Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and the main event here, Cooper Flagg, forms one of the best long-term defensive combinations in the entire association for several reasons. First of all, one of the things I loved about Alex Sarr last year was the potential to have him play out in space defensively, have him switch onto the perimeter. At times for Washington this year, we've seen him play the 4, we've seen him play a bit of the 5. Obviously, at the beginning of the year was kind of spreading his minutes between those two positions, has had more time as a 5 recently. But I think for Alex Sarr specifically, what makes him so special is the fact that you feel comfortable allowing him to guard out on the perimeter. If you go back to his time in the NBL with the Perth Wildcats, that was something he did very, very well for a team that relied on him to do that, rather than be a true anchor like we saw with someone like Donovan Clingan for UConn coming out of last year's draft class. Sarr's potential to play out on the perimeter does bring a lot of excitement, but when a team does switch their big man out into the perimeter, one of the long-term ramifications of that is you're pulling your best rim protector away from the hoop. But that's where the benefit of drafting Cooper Flagg comes in here. He is a multi-positional defender, just like how we saw Jason Tatum in the NBA Finals thrive defending Derik Lively and acting as your low man and trying to muck up pick and rolls by being able to switch those actions a little bit more comfortably. That is what Cooper Flagg will be able to bring here to Washington. A ton of matchup versatility. On some nights against non-post-up big men, you can put Cooper Flagg on centers. You can put him on small forwards. You can probably put him on twos. And even at times, we'll see him guard ones. Now, the old adage, oh, he can guard 1 through 5. I'm not going to say that here. I don't think Cooper Flagg is built to guard 1 through 5, but I think he's built to survive certain matchups 1 through 5 across the board, depending on who you're playing night to night. Now, I'm not asking Cooper Flagg to be a lockdown defender. The comp from a quote-unquote Western Conference GM comparing him to prime Kawhi Leonard, I don't exactly see that. Kawhi Leonard was such a special on-ball defender with his hand activity, his screen navigation. I don't see all of that from Cooper Flagg, but what I do see is a really special athlete with quick leaping ability, a ton of power in his lower base, someone who has some of the best recovery tools from a perimeter player we've seen in the last 10-15 years when it comes to draft classes. He is a very special defensive player and one that I think breathes life into the defensive versatility that Alex Sarr presents, that Bilal Coulibaly presents. You're going to have this switchy lineup where you can have players comfortable guarding out on the perimeter because you have enough length, size, shot blocking, rim protection behind Alex Sarr now if you want to use him in a variety of different ways. And then there's also the possibility of putting Flagg on the basketball more frequently to freely switch that actual action as well. Maybe Flagg's not your low man, but maybe he's just outright switching with Alex Sarr in some of these actions, and that's where I think the long-term benefit of adding Cooper Flagg defensively for Washington is really good. Offensively, I'm not going to drag on too much here. We know what he is. He has been a shot creation savant for Duke this season. He's done a ton of drive and kick. He creates out of 45 action a ton with Khaman Maluach, something that I think could be very good as well with Alex Sarr. There is going to be a little bit of a learning curve for him here working with Sarr as a popper instead of a just slip and roll kind of guy like Maluach has been. But for the most part here, the Wizards are getting a player who they can put the ball in his hands offensively, let him be a primary initiator, creator for their offense, and then defensively, he is one of the best gap fillers you could possibly imagine. He's going to protect the rim, he can get into the gaps defensively, play in the passing lanes, he has very great anticipation skills. All in all, he is firmly the best player in this year's draft class. It's really not a conversation. It's not even close. Cooper Flagg has the highest potential. He has the highest floor. He is the flat-out best player in this entire draft class. And I'm extremely excited for Washington here to potentially be adding him into their mix moving forward. Pick number 2, the Utah Jazz here now, a team that really badly, in my opinion, needs to hit on this pick and really need some lottery luck. They need to stay in the top 3 picks in this year's draft. Obviously, if they got the first pick, that would do a world of wonders for them. But in this mock draft, based on the standings as of right now, the second overall pick will suffice for them, and they will select guard Dylan Harper out of Rutgers, a very special guard who has one of my favorite micro skills in the entire 2025 NBA draft class. That micro skill specifically is splitting the pick and roll. When you watch this kid play, one thing that just continues to jump out to me when you watch the tape, you turn on the film, his ability to get downhill out of the pick and roll. You set high ball screens, you set slot ball screens, wing ball screens, whatever you want to call them. Anything above what would be the NBA break becomes a downhill match for Dylan Harper, who has been one of the best paint touch generators in this entire class, which is what really excites me about him. You go back to some prospects I've loved in the past, Jaden Ivey specifically, someone who I thought was going to be this elite paint touch generator in the NBA, and I think at times we've really seen that. Obviously, going through an injury now, we're going to hope for the best long-term for Jaden Ivey still, but Dylan Harper, to me, someone who wins with his handle, wins with his change of pace, change of direction, and I think really has that knack of getting downhill, putting the ball out in front of him. He's comfortable with his handle, knows how to take space when it's there for him. Now, there's questions about how consistent his pull-up jump shooting is going to be. There's questions about how he's going to fare against drop coverage immediately on day one of his NBA career. I do think those questions are fair. But given the fact that he is a freshman who is playing in a not great spacing context. His other 5-star freshman there in Ace Bailey hasn't been an extremely productive player or an efficient player for the Scarlet Knights this year. Dylan Harper was far and away, in my opinion, the best player for Rutgers this season, and someone who I do think, just when you look at his actual body of work, the ability to get downhill, the change of pace, the deceleration that we've seen at times, the willingness to get to the rim, finish into contact, through contact, and has the length and positional size to finish around contact as well, and kind of avoid contact with extended lay finishes. There is a lot of upside for him as a paint finisher, and I think if you are believing in that jump shot, which I find myself pretty cautiously optimistic at this point on, I don't think he's going to get guarded like a non-shooter, which would be one of the biggest concerns for me if I felt like teams are going to just firmly go under screens against him all the time and not respect him as a jump shooter. That would really, raise red flags for me. I don't feel that way right now about Dylan Harper, and I think going into this draft class, yes, Utah has been getting quote-unquote production from Isaiah Collier, mostly in the assist department. I think that when it comes to Dylan Harper, not only is he also a very good playmaker, someone who reads the weak side of the floor really well, weaponizes team defenses in the pick and roll, he is also a player who just has more natural scoring punch, more scoring gravity than Isaiah Collier. He's a bigger frame than Isaiah Collier in terms of his actual natural height. And I think just when it comes to the defensive end of the floor too, he's a better defender than Isaiah Collier, who has one of the worst defensive dashboards in the NBA this year. So when it comes down to it, I just think Dylan Harper is a significant talent addition here for Utah. I think at this point in the draft cycle, I'm very, very confident on him being the second overall pick. And I think the Jazz here are very happy selecting Dylan Harper out of Rutgers with this selection. Pick number 3, the Charlotte Hornets here now. At this spot of the draft, with both Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper off the board, it puts Charlotte in an interesting position. There's rumors, there's noise right now about a potential LaMelo Ball trade materializing within the next 12 to 18 months. That would be something fascinating to monitor, but I don't think that's ultimately going to happen this offseason. I hope not for Charlotte's sake. I do believe still in LaMelo Ball long term. And if you're a Hornets fan, you're looking at how to try and get the right pieces around him. And this is a big upside swing for Charlotte. Again, mock drafts, this is really important for me to remind you guys. Mock drafts are not what I would do. This is what I'm projecting to happen at this point in time. And in the middle of March here right now, I think the Charlotte Hornets would look to select wing Ace Bailey from Rutgers. We have back-to-back Rutgers Scarlet Knights going here in the top 3, second and third overall to Utah and Charlotte respectively. And when it comes to Ace Bailey specifically, there's a huge divide. There's a huge canyon-sized gap between the polarized parties on Ace Bailey. There are the that boy nice watchers who look at the contested tough shot making and say, oh my goodness, this guy has the best potential in the class. This guy might be the second coming of Kevin Durant, something I would never say, but that is what's being said out there. Then there's also the analytics guys, the people who don't put the calculator away and are saying, well, his true shooting percentage is in the low 50s, this, that, and the other thing. I really think when it comes to Ace Bailey, it's somewhere in the middle between those two arguments. Is Ace Bailey an absolutely terrible basketball player like a lot of the calculator people would say? No, I really don't believe so. I think there is a ton of feasible, functional tools for Ace Bailey to work with in the NBA that will make him an impactful player in a few ways. Specifically, when you look at his rebounding production, this is something, listen, the possessions battle is huge, and that's something when you look at the analytics departments, that's going to point to turnovers, it's going to point to rebound rate. Ace Bailey can specifically really help you in the rebounding department. He's got great natural size, he's extremely athletic, and he functionally applies that athleticism on the glass, both a bit offensively, but specifically on the defensive boards, and I think that's going to be one real benefit for drafting him. He's another player who's a wing type player who's going to get active on the glass, and I think that's a benefit in drafting him here. I also think defensively, even though he's not been the best defender by any stretch of the imagination at this point in time, the tools are there for him to be an impactful weak side help defender, a low man, someone who I think can be active in the gaps now. C-man, C-ball has been a problem for him. That's something I think he's going to have to be a bit better at in the NBA. Just his court spatial awareness, understanding where his man is, where he's supposed to be on the court with where the ball is positioned. That's going to be something where when you're drafting a true freshman player, you have to understand that development is going to be required in some of these areas. But the tools are definitely there for Ace Bailey to be productive. as a defensive player in some regards. I'm not saying he's going to be a stopper. I'm not saying he's going to be an elite on-ball defender. I've not said any of those things, so make sure you're understanding what I'm saying here. I'm not saying, oh, Ace Bailey's going to be an all-defense candidate. No, I think he can be a competent, competitive defender with his physical tools, and I also think rebounding-wise, he's going to be effective there. And then when it comes to his offensive game, playing off of someone like LaMelo Ball in the instance where Charlotte doesn't trade LaMelo Ball and they continue to build around him and Brandon Miller, this is where Ace Bailey's offensive fit becomes pretty unique. I think with the way that Dylan Harper specifically plays as a downhill driving kick guy, someone who's going to get 2 feet to the paint and then generate opportunities for his teammates off of that, that's fine and dandy, but it also, at times when teams aren't helping off of Ace Bailey, doesn't generate the looks that you would maybe in theory hope it does, especially given Rutgers' surrounding talent around these 2 5-stars. I think in Charlotte specifically, with LaMelo and Brandon Miller being the top 2 names on the scouting report from the perimeter perspective, Ace Bailey, and especially with the way teams provide gap help and low man help, that kind of thing out of pick and roll usage, LaMelo Ball, who is a super high volume 3-point shooter, as is Brandon Miller, someone who is going to shoot a ton of pull-up threes a game, Ace Bailey might find different kinds of opportunities offensively playing off the catch. And I think from a development standpoint, you know, everyone wants to look at the handle. Everyone, when you imagine Kevin Durant, you think about the Hezzy cross, you think about the Hezzy pull-up three. Those are things obviously that would benefit Ace Bailey if he adds those things into his game. But I think the most effective thing for him to start with developmentally is catch the ball, size up your defender, see where he's coming at you from on a closeout, and get a strong rip through to your right, get a strong rip through to your left on a one dribble pull up. And I think given his shot making talent, that's where you find some really devastating offensive upside with Ace Bailey, is imagining him playing off the catch and playing quickly, playing within a 1.5 second kind of time frame where, hey, catch the ball, make something happen off of that. You know, he's not Michael Porter Jr., but I think in that kind of role where he's playing within 1.5, 2 seconds of having the basketball, that's where you're going to find the most effective, efficient version of Ace Bailey. And I think around Charlotte, with LaMelo Ball's playmaking and his shot creation as a perimeter player, that's something that I think Charlotte could definitely work with moving forward. And then Ace Bailey's athletic tools, maybe after that, once you've developed that one dribble pull up, instead of taking 4, 5, 6 seconds to have something happen, if you can kind of train him to play quicker, play more effectively off the catch, that's where maybe you're going to be able to maximize some of that driving upside, that physical athletic gifts that he has in terms of getting to the rim, finishing above the rim. And then obviously you're hoping that the shot making, as his confidence grows and the efficiency starts to balloon a bit, playing in that kind of way, maybe that's where you start to see him kind of fully assume his potential as a true shot maker and somewhat shot creator, although the handle, the footwork for me right now just really aren't there. But again, this is not a mock of what I would do. This is a mock of what I would think happens, and I still think Ace Bailey is firmly in the running for a top 3 selection in the 2025 NBA draft cycle. Moving on to pick number 4, we have the New Orleans Pelicans here now. And the player for me that really stands out here for New Orleans, with obviously Cooper, Flagg, Dylan Harper, and Ace Bailey off the board at this point, is guard VJ Edgecombe from Baylor. And I think specifically Edgecombe at this point in time for the Baylor Bears would be a very fascinating acquisition for them. This is another upside swing. He's a player who, from a physical tools perspective and component, he's one of the most gifted players in this draft class. He has some freakish athletic tools, one of the best quick bursts in the entire class, one of the best vertical lift in the entire draft from a jumping component. And not only does he jump extremely high, he gets off the ground extremely quickly. In film, you see it all the time defensively, and then offensively as well. There's moments, you think about the missed dunk that went all the way to the backcourt this March already, too, as an example of, oh my gosh, this guy gets off the ground so quickly. Edgecombe, he looks like your prototypical what you would have imagined. Oh my gosh, the potential with this guy is so high because he runs fast and jumps so high. Now, potential really isn't tied to those things, and we know that. You know, if you've been watching this channel, basketball skill oftentimes, in my perspective, completely outweighs physical gifts and tools. But I think we've seen flashes of that as well from VJ Edgecombe. There's been moments this year where he splits the pick and roll. The handle, I think, does require a lot of work yet. I don't really trust him to be able to beat defenders one-on-one consistently at the NBA level at this point in time. But there's been flashes of some of those tools. I think right now, if I were to kind of categorize him as a player, I think he's going to be a very fun play finisher, an advantage finisher as well. Someone who, when you're already in advantage, if you have a player around him that can generate advantage, draw double teams, or create opportunities off of driving kicks, that's where Edgecombe could be very, very fascinating, attacking closeouts or playing as a cutter. And I think around Zion Williamson, with Zion's kind of recent playmaking bump, we obviously saw his first triple-double this season as well. Edgecombe could be a really fun, dynamic athlete around that kind of player. So for New Orleans here offensively, that's kind of what you're getting. And then defensively, I think one thing that, and this is going to be, again, a little bit of a project here. He's not built to be an on-ball stop or anything like that at this point in time, but just given his physical tools, the athletic traits that he possesses as a player, the two-way potential, specifically on the defensive end of the floor, for him to be someone who can mirror ball handlers, force ball handlers to change direction, and to be this really unique team defender who can provide a little bit of shot blocking as a guard, but can also have the athleticism to be your low man, but still effectively close out to the opposite side corner because of how quickly he can get anywhere on the court. For me, Viche Edgecombe is a very interesting defensive prospect and one that has flashed some really interesting offensive tools as well. And I think for New Orleans at this point in time, banking on that upside as a two-way player is something I could definitely see them doing 4th overall in the 2025 NBA draft. Moving on to pick number 5 now. The Brooklyn Nets here, a team that obviously has chosen a direction after the Mikal Bridges trade this summer. Obviously no Cam Johnson trade, no Nick Claxton trade yet at this point, but those are definitely things that they could revisit this summer. They have 4 first-round picks in this mock draft, so the Nets are already loaded with draft capital. And I think looking at the way Jordi Fernandez coaches, you look at his history as someone who was a top assistant for a while under Mike Brown, who ran a ton of zoom action and obviously really prioritized dribble handoffs with his big men. We've seen that kind of trickle-down effect into Brooklyn here as well, where they've ran way more handoffs this year than they did a year ago. And Nick Claxton's offensive effectiveness and his efficacy has dropped a bit, I think, offensively. So Brooklyn, if they're looking to kind of fit Jordi Fernandez's coaching style, I think it's time we look at Sean Marks finding a skilled big man, someone who can handle the ball, is comfortable out in space, is comfortable as a creator, a playmaker. And I think a lot of you are already assuming where I'm going with this pick. 5th overall, the Brooklyn Nets here select center Derik Queen from Maryland. And I really love watching this kid. Not only does he have an elite free throw rate for a big man, and one that's doing a lot of self-creation off the dribble, getting to the cup, playing off that kind of mid-post to the top of the key area of the floor. He is a really unique player for Maryland. In their first-round game against Grand Canyon, he really flashed a ton of the playmaking. You're talking about cross-court skips, utilizing the dunker spot kind of out of the middle of the floor. And I think for Brooklyn here specifically, I talked already about the importance of dribble handoffs and zoom action, something I can see Derik Queen really thriving with because he can weaponize cutters off of that as a playmaking hub for an offense. But I also think putting him around the top of the key against other big men in the Eastern Conference is going to be a real weapon, where Queen has a good natural amount of strength to him. He is a bigger boy, I like to say. Watching him play, he just is able to bowl downhill a bit and get to where he wants to go and then finish off of that as well with pretty good touch. There's been moments where we've seen that three-point shot come alive. It's not been a fully polished product at this point in time, but I think the upside here is really immense for Derik Queen as someone who's going to be able to generate free throws for himself, generate easy baskets off of dribble drive penetration, and then obviously the playmaking feel is really what is also a huge benefit. And one thing that I think is a little sneaky, underrated component of his game, he's pretty comfortable defending out on the perimeter. I think Maryland is willingly switching him out onto the perimeter more than maybe I would have even anticipated coming out of Montverde, where we saw him be a dominant big man around Cooper Flagg. We've seen him in a variety of different roles with Montverde. They kind of limited his game a little bit. And with Maryland, we've seen him kind of fully embrace this skilled big man role. And I think if you're projecting Derik Queen going on to the next level, which is what exactly we're doing here, 5th overall for Brooklyn, there's just a lot to love in terms of the offensive talent, some of the switchability. He does have pretty quick feet. He does a good job cutting off drives, and he presents with length. He's not someone who's going to challenge above the rim a ton. He's not going to record 3-4 block games super frequently in the NBA, in my opinion, but he plays with verticality. He gets his arms straight up in the air. He's not going to foul a ton. And I think when it comes to Derik Queen moving on to the next level, he might not be the best true anchor, rim protector, rim deterrent, but what I think he gives you is a really, really solid foundation defensively in terms of footwork and technique. And then offensively, there's just a ton of skill to work with, and that's what really excites me here for Brooklyn, fitting into Jordi Fernandez's offense, 5th overall in the 2025 NBA draft. Moving on to pick 6, the Philadelphia 76ers here, and boy, is Daryl Morey and the Sixers front office sweating. With bad luck in the NBA draft lottery, the Sixers could very well be sending the 7th overall pick to the Oklahoma City Thunder, but since this pick is top 6 protected and they are the 6th worst team in the league this year at this point in time, they do have control of this pick in this mock draft. So who do I have them going with? I have them selecting wing Trey Johnson from Texas, one of the better movement shooters in the entire NBA draft, arguably the best movement shooter in the NBA draft. One thing I really love when I watch this kid play is how he gets his balance underneath of him as a difficult shot taker and maker. And I think when we talked about Ace Bailey, when you think about the difficult shot making, Trey Johnson's difficult shot making is a bit different. Now, when it comes to potential, people are going to point to the lower free throw rate, the lower inside the arc finishing talents. I'm not saying Trey Johnson has superstar potential. I'm not saying he's going to be this first team All-NBA guy multiple times over and over and over again. But what I'm going to be saying here is this kid does have star potential because of his shot making. You think about the most predominant form of pick and roll coverage we see in the NBA right now, which is drop coverage, the value of rim protection. What that often means is pull-up jump shooting is the name of the game for great offensive players. You think about some of the most talented players offensively in recent NBA history. You think about the James Hardens, the Steph Currys, the Kevin Durant's of the world. They have all thrived off of perimeter shot making, and Trey Johnson can really make a ton of perimeter shots, and he does it off of movement without the ball. He does it on pull-up shot making with the ball in his hands. This kid is a bucket getter, and I really enjoy watching him play every single time because there are shots where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's taking that, and then he makes it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's Trey Johnson. That's in his game. I have a lot of fun watching this kid play basketball. He's extremely, extremely talented. And I think for Philadelphia, not only did they take Jared McCain last year, who was a very, very good pull-up and movement shooter, but now they're adding to that with another one. And listen, I think the 76ers have some real problems going forward. Paul George's contract is at the very top of that list. Do they have a real true point guard between Maxey and McCain? Not really. They kind of have two good quality combo guards. Obviously, different levels. Maxey's a better player than McCain, obviously. But the two of them together do make an interesting backcourt with Joel Embiid, who we would assume is still going to be their best player moving forward. How does Trey Johnson kind of fit into all of this? That's where things get a little messy, because the more shooting, the more floor spacing around Embiid, the better in my opinion. But there are other needs that the 76ers have in terms of size, rim protection, pieces around Embiid defensively that could, I think, help them move forward. Trey Johnson doesn't address all of those needs. The 76ers have had a horrendous season, both in terms of injury luck and actual on-court play. But I do think Trey Johnson, from an actual talent perspective, does warrant a top 6 pick in this year's draft at this point in time. And I feel very, very confident about the 76ers feeling pretty happy walking away with Trey Johnson at this selection. Pick number 7, the Toronto Raptors here now, a team that has a ton of money committed to their starting 5 next year. I'm not super confident in Toronto. I was able to see them live earlier this past week against the Phoenix Suns, and it was one of the least competitive games of the entire NBA season. Just not really competitive in any stretch of the imagination. Now, listen, I know Toronto's been without some players. This is not a obituary for Toronto going into next year, but I think the Raptors have a lot of issues and a lot of things to solve moving forward. Obviously, being healthy is going to be one of those things that can help them move forward in that direction, but I still have some real concerns about the way this roster is built in terms of three-point volume, shot making, and then also having enough rim protection, having enough defensive capabilities. Scotty Barnes is a very, very awesome player, but I think kind of realizing his potential and then turning that potential into winning with the roster around him. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for Toronto at this point in time, but it doesn't mean I don't love who they're going to take here 7th overall. I have the Raptors selecting center Khaman Maluach from Duke. The former Basketball African League product is, I think, a very, very, very fun pickup here for the Raptors with this pick. And the reason for that is not only does he possess elite size at 7'2" with great shot block timing, he's extremely comfortable operating as a helper, and I think has really good feel already in terms of knowing when to utilize his body to bring that help and try and meet the ball at the glass, something I think he does really well. He doesn't overcommit and leave dump off passes super easily. Now, for Duke against other college basketball players, I think that's been an easy thing for him because of how much overall talent, length, and size that team as a college unit already has. But Toronto does have a lot of length, size, and defensive acumen already in their front court as well. You think about Ingram, who's a very long defender and has been a part of good defensive units in New Orleans in the past. You think about Scotty Barnes, who's a really special defensive player in his own right. I think this is a good landing spot for Maluach defensively. And then offensively, I think there's some potential here if Toronto's able to get their hands on a kind of different offensive style where they're using Scotty Barnes in kind of a Jalen Johnson role that we see with Atlanta. Now, the Raptors don't have Trae Young. They don't have a player who's going to get aggressively blitzed out on the three-point line all of the time. But if you're thinking about trying to find a way to make this work, you put Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes in a 14 action together. Quickley hits Barnes on a short roll, and you're trying to float the ball up to Khaman Maluach as a dunker spot lob sitter. That's kind of what I'm envisioning here. Or otherwise, you think about some of their recent draft picks with Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter. Maybe Maluach can be setting off-ball screens while you run that kind of action to try and mitigate your help defense and get Scotty Barnes into one-on-one advantage or two-on-one attack options out of the middle of the floor more frequently. I think there's ways to utilize Maluach pretty effectively for Toronto, even though there is a real absence in spacing and some of their team context in general. There is still a lot that I do like about the way that Maluach could fit here for Toronto. So 7th overall, that is where I have the Raptors going at this point in time. Pick number 8, the Miami Heat, who have really not performed well after the NBA trade deadline. Of course, they did move off of Jimmy Butler, and I thought with Jimmy Butler being out, I thought maybe the Heat would kind of find new life, kind of a little bit of a weight lifted off their shoulders, and that just hasn't happened. It's been pretty surprising to me that they've been as bad as they have been. Long losing streaks, just have been completely eviscerated in the fourth quarter of games. The second half in general has not been pretty for Miami in games post the NBA trade deadline. So the Heat do have a lot of work to do. It's been a very long, stressful, and disappointing season, quite frankly, for the Miami Heat. But 8th overall, this is a really good opportunity for them to add in a talented player. And I have them here selecting guard Kasparas Jakucionis, who has completely fallen out of the lottery in other mock drafts. I tend to try and avoid looking at other mock drafts completely because I want my mock drafts to be representative on what I expect to happen. But from time to time, I do see them, especially on Twitter as I'm scrolling, and I'm obviously so immersed in college basketball discussions and everything, so they just naturally pop up on my For You page. I can't believe people are taking Jakucionis completely out of the lottery. Now, I do understand some of the concerns about the athletic tools and winning in isolation. That's something I've talked about multiple times myself. What's his scoring gravity really like when he's not involved in the pick and roll? Those are questions I've had for a while now. And it's fun to see other people starting to look at some of those problems too and starting to kind of understand where he should potentially go. I still think for a team like Miami, who could be looking for a lead ball handler, someone who can generate offense, run high ball screens, and I think specifically the thing about Jakucionis that I really love the most is the dynamism in his attack options offensively out of ball screens. And I think for Miami specifically, that opens up a world of flexibilities, whether it's with Duncan Robinson as a small-to-small screen with ghost action, or if you're looking for pick and pop screens. That's something Kasparas Jakucionis has been really good at with Ivisic there in Illinois, or at Illinois this year. And I think when it comes to utilizing Bam Adebayo as a short roll guy, if you're looking at Jakucionis in terms of his overall size, positionally, and then his ability to play make out of ball screen action, he is really, really, really dependable and reliable. And he's got a very good stride stop. He's got a good step back. He does have ways to score for himself as well. Now, a lot of them rely on footwork, they rely on creativity. He's not going to be this player who just wins completely off of his first step and gets downhill at ease all of the time. And those were some of the questions I had for him, which made me hesitate putting him in the top 3 or top 2 in my mock drafts, whereas other people were talking about him as maybe the second or third best player in the class. I was a little bit more hesitant on that. And I think kind of right now I find myself in the middle of where those perspectives were. People who are thinking, oh, he's a top 2 pick. People right now who are thinking he's not a lottery pick. I think I've stayed pretty level-headed, pretty kind of even-keeled this year with Kasparas Jakucionis. I still have him as a top 10 pick. For me, his draft range has really kind of moved from 4 to about 8-ish. Now, the very beginning of the year, I had him just outside of the lottery. And I think, quickly moved him in after, 2-3 games of college basketball. So, I've been kind of in the same spot with him for a few months now. Anywhere from about pick 4 to pick 8 or 9. I still think he's a very interesting player because of the sheer prevalence of ball screens and how good he is at making different kinds of reads out of those things and that action specifically. So I think for Miami, 8th overall, I feel very, very good about this draft selection for them. Pick number 9, the San Antonio Spurs here now. Obviously, we are wishing for the best of health for Victor Wembanyama long term. Obviously, a very scary situation, one that I think we all hope he comes back and is able to play at full strength as soon as possible. So here's hopes to that, but San Antonio specifically shutting down De'Aaron Fox, Noa Penda. This team has their eyes toward the draft already. They have 2 picks in this year's draft in the first round, this one, and then also the pick via the Atlanta Hawks. 9th overall, I have the Spurs here selecting wing Knueppel out of Duke, one of the best shooters in the draft, has hovered around 40% all season long for the Duke Blue Devils, has been a very consistent, reliable contributor. Think back to some of the first games of the season where he was an absolute flamethrower, could not miss to start the season, had some really high scoring games, and that has trickled those in there as well throughout the course of the year. I think what we've seen from Knueppel so far is a really effective, efficient player who is very easy to predict how he'll translate to the NBA as a movement shooter who does a bit more than just shoot off the move. And what I mean by that is when he catches, he's not just going to be a solely Duncan Robinson type player. And honestly, I think Duncan Robinson, it's funny, he's come up twice now in this mock draft, has been a little bit underrated throughout his career in terms of being able to do more than just play off the catch, play off of movement shooting. And, at times in Miami, it was whether it was coming off of dribble handoffs with Bam Adebayo or attacking closeouts or giving that pump fake and, give and go, playing off of that a bit. Knueppel shows a little bit of that in his game as well. Now, I do think it's going to take maybe a couple of years for him to really maximize that element of his game, especially against NBA length, size, rim protection, something that he hasn't consistently faced in his time at Duke. Obviously, he's playing very good competition more often than not, but still there's a real elevation from the college game to the pros. But when it comes to Knueppel specifically, what I've really loved is his ability to catch, rip, go. And I talked about that with Ace Bailey, playing off the catch, giving one dribble pull-ups or, getting to the rim effectively, quickly when attacking closeouts. And I think Knueppel is someone who does that really, really well already. And I think he understands his shooting gravity. And gravity is the most essential word, honestly, in all of basketball. If you are someone who has to get guarded a certain way, if you have to draw double teams coming off of movement, if you draw a ton of defensive attention, if teams feel like they have to close out extremely aggressively against you, if you're going to draw a lot of pump fake, guys are going to fly by you on pump fakes, those are things that are going to just open up other avenues of offensive basketball for you. And Knueppel already understands that. He's going to be someone who is going to be a good relocation shooter, has already flashed a ton of those skills, flashes movement off of utilizing flare screens, floppy action a bit, what we've seen from Duke this year a little, wide pins, just does a little bit of everything for Duke in terms of movement. And then playing off of that, again, understanding that, hey, this guy's going to run me off the three-point line. From here now I can get downhill, maybe driving kick, sprayed out to another shooter. Duke's obviously had some pretty good success with Tyrese Proctor, Isaiah Evans this year when he's been on the floor in limited minutes. The Blue Devils have shooting around Knueppel as well, and I think we've seen Knueppel in a role that really looks like pro-style offense, specifically catered to him. And I think with the Spurs here, getting this kind of player around Wembanyama, this kind of player around De'Aaron Fox is going to be a very, very, very good long-term piece for the Spurs moving forward. Pick number 10, the Chicago Bulls here now. At this spot, listen, I think center was going to be a spot I would look with either one of Derik or Khaman Maluach, but given the recent play of Josh Giddey, who's been averaging, I think, 18, 8, and 8 over the last 20, 30, 40 games maybe, something that before the year, if you go back to my thoughts on Giddey, I honestly thought he could have averaged 18, 8, and 8 for the entire season. I did not hate the Giddey-Caruso trade as much as everyone else did. Now, I did think OKC won that trade, and looking at how well the Thunder have played this year, I think, very, very reasonably they have still. But Giddey has been putting up individual numbers. Now, he's going to be a free agent. The Bulls are going to have to pay him. Kobe White's been playing extremely well, too, for the Bulls. So they do have some guards already in place. I do think they're optimistic about their pace and their backcourt specifically. So going into this, if they can't find a center, it's going to be kind of difficult to imagine what they're going to look at. So for me, it's about connectivity. It's about finding a piece that could fit long-term around other pieces, giving flexibility, giving optionality to Chicago. And that player here, 10th overall, is Collin Murray-Boyles for South Carolina. Now, the Gamecocks were not any good this year, but Collin Murray-Boyles tried pretty much every single game to lift them out of the mud. It was by far their best player in terms of pretty much every single component of the game. Averaged about 2.5 stocks per game. I think defensively, a lot of connectivity there in terms of being able to fill in gaps, being able to protect the rim a bit, being able to sit down in a stance and actually guard it and force misses on the basketball. Murray-Boyles flashed a little bit of everything defensively in terms of event creation and just flat out guarding out in space and winning individual matchups at times. What we've also seen from Murray-Boyles is really fun offensive connectivity. I talked about the pace with Chicago and how fast they want to play. One of the big changes for Billy Donovan over the last few years has been a real uptick in pace in the way his offenses work. And I think for the Bulls specifically, Murray-Boyles can be someone who really functions well out of short rolls. And you think about Vucevic as a floor spacer for them. He's had a really great stretch big man year for the Bulls this season. Murray-Boyles, if you're going to draft him somewhere in the lottery, I would really prefer for him to land in a spot next to a stretch big man. And I think in Chicago right now, with how Vucevic has played specifically this year, Murray-Boyles becomes a very interesting fit there for them as someone who can function as a short roll, finish around the rim. He can post up smaller options as well, something he does quite a bit in college. He's just a very unique player, right? Plays with his back to the basket. This is a player that I think is going to be a very polarizing prospect down the stretch of this draft cycle, because some people are going to look and say, well, he's an underdeveloped shooter. He's an undersized big man, essentially. Like, what kind of player can this really be? But then when you actually look at the functional tools, the IQ, the intelligence as a basketball player, you're gonna garner some comparisons to Draymond Green, which is an NBA Hall of Famer first ballot. So it's hard, right? There's going to be people who are super, super optimistic. There's going to be some people who are super pessimistic. I kind of find myself in the middle where if you get him into the right spot with the right team pace and the right team spacing context around him, there can definitely be some huge benefits. But if you draft him into a team that doesn't have a ton of shooting already, there's going to be some long-term ramifications as well of that are negative consequences. So I think it's going to be really important to find the right team context for Collin Murray-Boyles, which is what makes building a big board so hard, because if he goes to destination X, Y, or Z, I might really love it and say, wow, this guy's going to have a really great career there. Or if he goes to city A, B, or C, I might say, well, I don't know how this is all going to fit together, and I'm a little hesitant on being super optimistic. So that's the hard thing about big boards. It's the hard thing about drafts and mock drafts specifically, is you want to project what you think the player's going to do and how well he'll perform without really knowing where he's going to be performing and who he'll be performing around. And that's really the tricky part about basketball, specifically when it comes to draft evaluation. Looking at pick 11 here, the Portland Trailblazers, who have been one of the better surprising teams over the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so in the NBA. They've been playing really good basketball. They're actually 2 games out of a play-in spot at the time I'm recording this. Obviously, Dallas's season from hell, trading Luka Doncic and all of their injuries, has opened up a potential pathway for Portland to sneak into the play-in game. You also look at Phoenix, who just hasn't been super consistent or good this year, pretty much since the first week of the year. It's opened up avenues for Portland to maybe be a sneaky play-in team. Now, this pick is actually lottery protected. So for Blazers fans, if you're wanting to keep this pick, you're going to want to miss the playoffs, which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's the reality. 11th overall, though, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting guard Jase Richardson from Michigan State. Now, this was a tricky spot for me. You can go best player available. You can go positional fit need. with them drafting Donovan Clingan last year, really what I would hope to find for Portland is a bigger hybrid forward who can help them in a variety of different ways. I just didn't really think that player at this spot in the draft would outweigh the value that Jase Richardson brings, who has been one of the most effective, efficient players in all of college basketball this season. At the time I'm recording this, his true shooting percentage is hovering around 64%. He's been uber efficient on three-point volume, and as the year has kind of gone on for the Spartans, so has his usage rate and his actual on-ball involvement in their offense. And I think for the Portland Trailblazers here, well, yes, you do have Scoot Henderson, you have Shaedon Sharpe, you have Anthony Simons, you have Deni Avdija, who's going to command the ball quite a bit. I think Jase Richardson's a unique fit because he's been really productive off the ball this year in a role with Michigan State that he was predominantly playing toward the beginning of the season. And then also as the year's gone on with injuries and certain opportunities that opened up for him, he's been effective on the basketball. And I think for Portland here, if you're looking for improvement, you just need to find good players. And I think what I've been saying pretty much all draft cycles since starting to include Jase Richardson in my first round mock drafts has been that I think Jase Richardson's good at basketball. He's somebody who can be very effective around bigger playmakers, someone like a Deni Avdija. I believe in some of my past mock drafts, I had him going in the middle of the teens to a team like Orlando, and I talked about how maybe he could fit around Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero in that kind of way. Well, in Portland here, you can move him up a few more spots in the draft, but I think fitting around someone like Scoot Henderson, fitting around someone like Shaedon Sharpe, the athletic tools he has, fitting around Deni Avdija, who's been a very, very good player this year for Portland as well. This is just from a skill set perspective. I just think Jase Richardson's good at basketball. He can play, he's talented, dribble, pass, shoot. You guys know what my draft philosophy around that is. This is a player who's going to really stand out in a positive way for Portland. I think this is the type of player they need to further push them forward in terms of their overall collection of talent and offensive tools that can further move the needle toward winning there in the Northwest. At number 12, we have my Dallas Mavericks here now. Obviously, this has been the hardest Mavericks season of my entire lifetime. Not only from the front office, the fire Nico chants, everything like that, with the Luka Doncic trade, but then you look at the bad luck involved as well. Anthony Davis hurt after 31 minutes of game time with the Mavericks. You look at Kyrie Irving tearing his ACL, which not only destroys their chances this season, but really negatively impacts them next year as well. The Mavericks are just in a really rough spot right now. So given the fact they traded one of the best shot creators and offensive engines of all time in Luka Doncic, I think that's the way the Mavericks are going to look to draft here, which obviously when you say it out loud sounds really stupid that they made the first decision, causing the second one to have to be the way that they look. But 12th overall, I have the Dallas Mavericks here selecting guard Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma. There's a lot of buzz around Jeremiah Fears, and I definitely understand why. You watch this kid play, he's one of the more fun players to watch in the entire draft, and at times has really shown on-ball expertise and dominance for Oklahoma. And it kind of brings me back to some of the Trae Young days a little bit in terms of the fun ball handling out of the pick and roll and hitting guys dive into the rim. And obviously Oklahoma's done such a good job of putting him in positions to not only develop and make those reads, but then also utilizing his talents to their benefit. But I do think there are still some problems. First of all, when you're drafting a shot-creating guard, you're drafting someone who, like Jeremiah Fears, you would project to be an on-ball player predominantly in the NBA. You're looking at a guy who's going to probably need the ball in his hands quite a bit, and then you have to project, okay, who's he going to be better than? Because if you're going to try and succeed with this guy as your primary ball handler, one of your top two primary ball handlers, he needs to be a top 30, 35-ish, 40-ish player in the world for your team to really have a legitimate chance around that. And that's where, for me, with Fears, someone who right now is kind of more of a streaky shooter than a good one. He only shot 28% from three this year. I saw someone on Twitter talk about seeing comparisons to Kyrie Irving or OJ Mayo. Kyrie Irving shot 46% on threes in his short sample size at Duke. OJ Mayo shot over 40% on threes on about 6.5 3-point attempts per game in his college basketball career. Jeremiah Fears is shooting 28% from three in his college career in his lone season. So yes, I know people are going to say, well, he's younger, his potential, right? You're looking at skills and tools. And for me, you guys know, I don't just say, oh, well, the 3-point percentage says this, so that's done with. But there's other things I'm concerned about. If you are someone who's watching this and tends to watch back a lot of film, I want you to watch Jeremiah Fears when he doesn't have the ball offensively. What's his movement patterns look like? Is he moving to get open? What's his relocation tools look like? And that's something, if you're projecting him playing around another guard like Kyrie Irving, well, Kyrie Irving's going to have the ball quite a bit too. Anthony Davis will have the ball quite a bit. I think there's some real tools here with Jeremiah Fears, but I think there's a long pathway for him to really realize that potential and become that kind of player in the NBA, especially with where he's currently at as a shooter, and his off-ball movement patterns specifically are what kind of lead me away from him a little bit more than where other people currently seem to be at with him in this process. Pick number 13, the Houston Rockets here have this pick via the Phoenix Suns, of course. Houston, man, having those 3 Suns picks in 25, 27, 29 looks pretty darn good right now. 13th overall, the Houston Rockets here I have selecting forward Liam McNeeley from UConn, someone who, there are some real negatives here. I think the lateral mobility defensively in the NBA is going to be a challenge, and you might already say, if you're a Rockets fan, well, then we're not drafting him because Ime Udoka loves defense. And I completely understand that perspective, but I just want to remind you guys, the Rockets have really predominantly struggled as a three-point shooting team for a vast majority of this NBA season. And Liam McNeeley, even though the three-point percentage, again, is not going to suggest he's this elite three-point shooter, you look at his overall size, profile, and his three-point shooting, even spanning back through his high school days with Montverde Academy, he's going to shoot the ball well. And I think off of movement, off of standstill catch-and-shoot opportunities, he can shoot out of the corner relatively well. And I think given his overall size and length, he's someone I am going to trust to be an impactful player at the NBA level as a catch-and-shoot, provide a little bit of team size, positional size to your roster. Liam McNeeley for me here, this is a huge need for Houston. It's just shooting. Now, ultimately, if the Rockets end up deciding to trade this pick instead of using it, and they make some type of big splash move for someone like Devin Booker or Giannis Antetokounmpo, those, of course, have been some of the rumored names. I would not at all be upset about that. But if they do stick and make an actual selection here, I think someone like Liam McNeeley does make sense from a size and shooting profile perspective moving forward. And then I think for the Rockets, you don't need to swing on more high upside potential players. I think you already have those kinds of guys in the building with Reed Shepherd, and Thompson, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün are still realizing their own potentials. I think the Rockets, you're looking for players who can be beneficial core role players around that talent, and someone like Liam McNeeley, for me, getting him on a relatively cheap rookie contract as a spacer for this team, I think makes a lot of sense moving forward for the Rockets. Pick number 14, the Atlanta Hawks here now. This pick, of course, comes from the Sacramento Kings. And 14th is a pretty good spot for the Hawks to do a little bit of digging. Now, after trading DeAndre Hunter, you could look into their front court needs, but also one thing that has kind of plagued them throughout the course of the season is just the playmaking when Trae Young is off the court. He has had, specifically in the second half of the season, one of the best on-off net rating splits in the entire league, and that's not necessarily just because the Hawks are good with him on the court. It's because they're terrible when he's been off the court for certain stretches of time this year, specifically in the second half of the season. So I think for Atlanta specifically, when you're looking at trying to address that need for playmaking, that need for another guy who's comfortable handling the basketball, that's why we're going to turn our eyes here, 14th overall, to BYU product Egor Demin. The Russian guard is someone who I think, again, I've said polarizing quite a bit in this mock draft so far. This one is really polarizing. Egor Demin's a talented player, but the free throw rate's really low, the three-point percentage is low, the overall field goal percentage is low, the true shooting percentage is low. The numbers do not suggest that Egor Demin's going to be a good NBA player. But when you watch him play, there are things that I think are going to be interesting. He's gotten blitzed quite a bit in ball screens this year for BYU. They forced the ball out of his hands against especially lesser competition, something that I think has really stood out to me. And then against other better competition as well, he's been defended in ways that other prospects in this class just haven't been. And then I also think from an actual eye test perspective, he's accurate as a passer. He goes through reads quickly. He reads the weak side of the floor extremely well. There's a lot of tools that I do like, and he's huge. He's about 6'8", 6'7". Obviously, we'll see where he actually measures in at the NBA Combine officially. But 14th overall, Egor Demin, I'm pretty confident will be a lottery pick, just given his size, playmaking feel, the IQ, a lot of that stuff's there. Now, I think an NBA weight room is going to be a revelation for him, hopefully. If he gets quite a bit stronger, and especially in his lower body where he's able to hold his drive lanes better. He's more comfortable playing into contact, something he really avoids right now. He does not like playing into contact at all, and that's been, I think, one of the biggest problems in his game that has really negatively affected his efficiency and his overall impact in key games this year. He just shies away from physicality, shies away from contact, and in the NBA you can't do that. It's going to be a project pick here if you take Egor Demin in the lottery, but I do think ultimately if he gets stronger, especially in his base, gets a little bit quicker, adds to his burst a bit, there is a lot of potential upside perceivably in terms of the overall willingness to take pull-up shots. Now, he hasn't officially connected on a ton of those yet in his career, but I think if you're looking at how you're kind of projecting him moving forward, and again, I think this is a big projection type of pick here for Atlanta, you're hoping that he becomes this really dynamic pull-up shot maker who can look over the top of the defense, spray the ball around, and pass it to open shooters, especially in Atlanta's team context, which is already so heavily reliant on Trae Young creating 60-70% of their offense as it currently sits anyway. The Orlando Magic here now at number 15 overall. They have not had a strong season for themselves, honestly. I think in terms of where the expectations were for Orlando to take a step forward this year, it's been pretty disappointing. Now, I do think Paulo Banchero's injury and some of the other injuries, specifically look at Suggs, the Wagner brothers missing some time this year as well. Those things have all kind of stacked on top of each other and really, kind of dwindled this season a bit for Orlando. But there's also just inherent flaws with the way this team is built. Their overall spacing context, that's something I talk about obviously a lot in these mock drafts, is you just need to shoot the ball. Everyone in the media understands, 3 points win games, and then we get to the NBA draft community and we don't talk about 3-point shooting enough, and we don't value guys who shoot the ball really, really well. It's honestly so perplexing to me, but it's the reality, and I kind of have to deal with that in these mock drafts of saying, well, even though this guy's way better at putting the ball in the hoop, which is the primary goal, I don't always mock that guy higher than the other ones because that's not the reality. They're not going to get drafted higher, even though they're better at shooting the ball. It's pretty crazy to me. But 15th overall, I have the Orlando Magic here selecting forward Noa Essengue from Ratiopharm Ulm, a player who I think is, again, pretty fascinating to talk about. He's, I think, predominantly going to be a play finisher in the NBA. And I think if you look at how Orlando already shakes out in terms of their ball dominance in between Wagner and Banchero, then you look at the guards utilizing, having the basketball, playing with the ball in their hands a bit. This is the type of player that I think fits long-term for Orlando. Essengue's had stretches where he's been a very productive three-point shooter, playing off of Ben Saraf for Ratiopharm Ulm in a pro league over in Germany this year. So I think for Orlando specifically, obviously Magic fans here are saying, oh great, Germany again. The Wagner brothers are obviously beloved there for the Magic, but I think Essengue specifically is someone who, as a play finisher, would theoretically fit around Banchero, around Wagner, the areas of the floor that they occupy. Essengue does a lot of his work out of the corner as a backside wing cutter, or corner cutter, then also a spot-up guy out of the corner. For me, I don't really believe in the potential. People are going to point to the super high free throw rate. I just don't believe in the self-creation tools at all here for Noa Essengue, really, at this point in time. I'm just very, very, very hesitant. Some people are even throwing out the Giannis Antetokounmpo comparison. I can't believe that. In no way at all do I see that. But for Orlando here specifically at 15, this is the type of player I could definitely see them expressing interest in. He has that length. That's something Orlando specifically over the last 5, 6, 7 drafts or so has really heavily prioritized, is looking at length, looking at just positional size, and obviously the value that they put on length and size in the draft is very, very evident and undeniable. So Essengue here at 15 is something that I do think is within the realm of possibility. Pick number 16, the San Antonio Spurs on the clock again. Remember, we went with Knueppel, 9th overall. 16th overall here now, I have them selecting forward Carter Bryant from Arizona. And Carter Bryant is a very fun prospect to talk about. He's built like a true NBA player, and I think that's something that's going to stand out down the stretch of this NBA draft cycle here as we start to get toward the combine and individual workouts. When GMs, executives, owners see this guy in person, they're going to say, this guy's huge. He's like 6'7", 6'8", big, broad shoulders. He's got muscle on his frame already. He looks like an NBA player, and I think that's going to help him quite a bit in terms of how GMs and executives view him as an NBA draft prospect. He's also had a productive year as a freshman for Arizona as well. Shot the ball very, very well, shooting a little bit over 37% from three this season. He's shooting over 63% on two-pointers this year. And I think for San Antonio specifically, we already addressed a movement shooter with Knueppel, someone who I think could be a very good perimeter fit on this team. I think Carter Bryant becomes this very unique corner-cutting fit for the Spurs as well, giving them some of that functional strength. Again, I talked about he has muscle on his frame. He's got big, broad shoulders. He's someone who I think is going to be able to battle with other bigger forwards, bigger wings in the NBA. I think that's going to be a huge benefit for San Antonio if you draft him here. But he's also a very fun and dynamic cutter. He attacks closeouts extremely well as a driver of the basketball, but specifically can finish above the rim really, really well, and he's not impeded at all by contact. So I think if you're looking at where Wembanyama loves to play, around the top of the key, toward the free throw line, Carter Bryant cutting out of the corner with Wembanyama's continued development as a playmaker passer, this is where you think about Knueppel flying from the wing down into the corner. You think about Carter Bryant cutting out of that corner. You put this dynamic spacing around Wembanyama where you have guys who can really finish plays, whether it's Carter Bryant at the rim or off the catch on the three-point line, Knueppel flying off of movement. The Spurs get a lot better here, and I think Bryant's two-way play specifically is what would draw San Antonio into considering him here 16th overall as an upside swing who has pretty functional tools to fit in right away on day one of his NBA career. Pick number 17, the Minnesota Timberwolves here now. This pick, of course, via the Detroit Pistons through the New York Knicks. This pick's been traded about 7 different times seemingly, but of course now belongs to Minnesota from the Karl Anthony Towns trade. And at 17, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves here selecting forward/center Danny Wolf from Michigan. And I really love the idea of Minnesota drafting Danny Wolf here. Now, 17 might seem a little high for Danny Wolf, but this, I think, just makes a ton of sense. First of all, I was around the Minnesota Timberwolves in person, credentialed media member, watching them all last year on route to the conference finals. And the player who best utilized Rudy Gobert was Karl Anthony Towns. You think about the 45 action, the high ball screen action between the two big men, Cap throwing lobs to Gobert at the rim. The 7-foot connection was very tough to beat. And if you watch the Michigan Wolverines at all this year, you'll know the two names, Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden. Those two guys have essentially recreated what the Wolves were last year in terms of the 45 action. Wolf has been so fun to watch playing out of ball screens this year in Dusty May's offense and connecting with his fellow big man there, Vladislav Golden, at the rim, whether Danny Wolf gets blitzed on the perimeter or if they just naturally switch. Golden has very good timing, slipping to the rim, and I think Wolf's playmaking vision, his ability to handle the ball in space. Now listen, I don't think he really trusts his handle against ball pressure. I think that is one of the big negatives I have against him right now in terms of his long-term upside potential. He's just not someone who really trusts his handle. He really relies on his body to protect the basketball. You think about how often he goes to that spin move of his. But it doesn't mean he can't be productive, especially in the NBA, in certain lineups and around Rudy Gobert specifically. If you're looking to, again, try and maximize Rudy Gobert in the offensive end of the court, someone like Danny Wolf can really make a lot of sense. Now, Wolf does have some other negative issues. I talked about C-man, C-ball, his defensive positioning. Those are things that are going to be problematic for him as well a bit in the NBA. But I think in the Western Conference, he has a far better chance of succeeding than he does in the East. You think about the 4-5 combinations in the East from some of the best teams, Tatum and Porzingis, Siakam and Turner. You think about Anunoby and Karl Anthony Towns in the East. There's a lot of big, strong kind of wing-type power forwards in the East, and then centers who can stretch the floor, whereas in the West, you're dealing with Aaron Gordon, Jokic. You're dealing with, maybe PJ Washington and Derek Lively, or Anthony Davis, Derek Lively. You're not really as worried about the floor spacing component. You're more so looking for natural size and playmaking feel, and that's what Danny Wolf brings here to Minnesota. I think Wolf fits a lot better into the West than he does in the East, and that's why I think a team like Minnesota should really strongly consider him 17th overall. Pick number 18, the Utah Jazz here now. Funny enough, this pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves from the Rudy Gobert trade. And with this pick, I have the Jazz here selecting wing Noa Penda, playing in France. And I think for Noa Penda specifically, you're looking at a 3-and-D type of wing, someone who really doesn't give you a lot in terms of driving the basketball or creating off the dribble himself very much, but this is a role player. This is a rotation player that's going to fit around other talent. And we already had the Utah Jazz grab Dylan Harper in this draft. You obviously have one of the best play finishers in the entire NBA in Lauri Markkanen, who hasn't had the best season for himself, but has still been quality. John Collins is a very good play finisher. You think about Walker Kessler as their kind of big man at the rim, both offensively and defensively. Penda gives you that swing skill where he's going to be that 3-and-D player. He's comfortable standing in the corner, playing off of the catch solely. He's not going to be someone who demands the ball a lot. This gives Utah the ability to continue developing their developable players. This gives them the opportunity to have Collier play with the ball in his hands. Dylan Harper plays with the ball in his hands a ton, obviously. Cody Williams, this addition of Noa Penda is not going to step on Cody Williams' toes at all, honestly. So this is the type of pick where like you can fit him into your young core without sacrificing the upside or development of anyone else, and just hopefully improving your basketball team. And Penda is someone who has good athletic tools, can guard up and down the lineup a little bit. I think 2 through 4 is what he's going to be pretty comfortable defending on day one of his NBA career in certain matchups. So for me, Noa Penda is a guy that I think does make some sense for a team like Utah here specifically, who's going to be looking for more wing, off-the-ball players that can fit around their other young talent. And I think Penda checks a lot of those boxes here at number 18 for Utah. Pick number 19, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes via the Milwaukee Bucks through the Mikal Bridges trade from New York. Now the Nets here at this spot end up selecting forward Asa Newell from Georgia. Sean Marks has had a real thing for drafting Georgia products in the past. You think about the Nick Claxton pick being one of the more recent examples of that. Noah Clowney as well. I think Asa Newell here specifically for me out of Georgia is a really unique defensive option. But for me, I just can't escape the Marvin Bagleyism in his game a bit. Obviously the handedness, you think about kind of the areas of the floor that he's capable of scoring from. He's going to be a screen and dive player. Now, one thing that I really love about this, we already drafted Derik Queen, who's going to be more of a stretch big man who can handle the ball out on the perimeter and play a skilled big role. So can Asa Newell and Derik Queen coexist? I think so. Had the Nets gone with someone like Khaman Maluach at 5, that would really complicate this Asa Newell pick, I think. So for me, this is trying to go best player available here at this spot in the draft. You're taking a bigger, lengthy forward who has really good finishing touch around the rim, obviously can get to his hook shot quite a bit, and then defensively presents a lot of length, athletic tools, is comfortable hedging out onto the perimeter a bit, guarding out in space just here and there a bit as well, and then can be impactful, cracking in as a shot blocker, getting on the glass quite a bit, something he does pretty well. So I think if you're looking at complementing Derik Queen long term, putting a forward combo center, maybe some combination of 4-5 hybrid here for Asa Newell, that's exactly what I think he could provide here next to Derik Queen as a unique front court fit with the new look Brooklyn Nets going forward. At pick number 20 now, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now, one of the best defensive teams in the league, and a team that already has their crux of offensive shot creation. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I think should be the MVP of the season. He's just been absolutely brilliant and dominant all year long, especially as of late, just like basically scoring a point a minute. He's been incredible for Oklahoma City. Then you look at, their other combination of talent defensively, Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams who takes charges like none other. Chet Holmgren's probably pound for pound the best defender in the league with how light he is. He's just been absolutely dominant, which is not surprising if you go back to my 2022 NBA draft conversations around him. Isaiah Hartenstein has been very, very good for them as well. No surprises there, really. The Thunder are just awesome. Caruso, Dort, I haven't even mentioned who's their best defender. This team is incredible, and they have the opportunity to add to that here with a really awesome 3-and-D player in forward Rasheer Fleming from St. Joseph's. Shot the ball really, really well this season and can guard all over the court. This is another player who I think as he bulks up specifically is going to become an even better defender in the NBA. He's got good lateral mobility, obviously very great length. He has a huge wingspan. And I think he's just going to be a productive, impactful defensive player. And for Oklahoma City, it's an example of the rich getting richer here. The Thunder don't need more defense, but they're going to get it anyway because that's what Sam Presti's really looking to do with his draft pick control moving forward. He wants to be able to not only continue to add cheap young talent, that helps them pay and afford to pay Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But what he wants to do as well is continue building a defensive infrastructure that doesn't require those three guys to be the primary workhorses defensively for them night in, night out. Obviously, Lu Dort, the contract he's on is a very good one for them, one that obviously brings a ton of value. Then you look at the young players that they've got. Caruso's contract that they acquired from Chicago was cheap before they extended him. Cason Wallace, a pick who is just barely in the lottery, right? Pick 10, I believe, has been really productive for them defensively. So the Thunder are going to continue finding players who can guard and putting that around their core nucleus of elite young players. And Rasheer Fleming's just another great example of that here at pick number 20. Pick 21, the Miami Heat here now. This pick comes from the Golden State Warriors as part of the Jimmy Butler trade. And I think for Miami specifically, obviously 8th overall, they already made a pick of Kasparas Jakucionis. You're looking just for more talent here. And for Miami specifically, I think just if you look at their overall roster around Hero and Bam Adebayo right now, they have middling talent. And I'm just not completely sold on everything that they have. Khalil Ware, I thought, was a really good pick for them where they selected him in 2024. But I'm going with Wing Adu Thiero here from Arkansas. This is one of the better cutters in the entire NBA draft. His true shooting percentage is hovering right around 60% this season. And he hasn't been a super productive shooter by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we've seen some progression from him. Now, he hasn't played since February 22nd, I believe. So this is a player who, right now, his buzz isn't soaring, which is why earlier in the year I had him kind of in the middle of the first round, maybe even approaching the lottery a little bit. I have him at 21 here now, and I think for Miami, this is a very smart pick. This is another player who, once you get him into individual workouts, you see him at the combine, you're going to say, boy, is this kid really strong. He's built like an NBA player. He's built like a strong NBA wing. This is someone who I think day one can come in and play a kind of role for Miami. You think about kind of the value that Haywood Highsmith has given them. I really love Adu Thiero's ability to muck up the game in the gaps. I really considered mocking him 20th overall to Oklahoma City before going ultimately with Rasheer Fleming. Thiero, for me specifically, is someone who I think stands out. Fleming's a better shooter at this point in time, but Thiero's a better cutter. I think very, very strong overall body archetype, and I think a little bit quicker as well. So I trust him guarding out on the perimeter a little bit more. And I think specifically with his activity level, his wingspan, his length, his size, and just his positional understanding, I think that's one of the most important things that gets overlooked in the draft. When you look at IQ, guys who understand where to be, when to be there, that's something Adu Thiero does very, very well defensively. And his multi-year college career has led him to a spot where I think he's really improved as a player, averaging about 16 points per game this year, finding unique ways to really function that way. And I talked about maybe Jakucionis and Adebayo functioning together earlier in this mock as them being kind of this unique short roll pairing, as Jakucionis has very good passing skills and vision and can really weaponize different screen opportunities. And then you think about Thiero cutting out of the corner there and being that kind of dunker spot occupier for Adebayo to float lobs up to, something Adebayo does extremely well. Now they already do have Khalil Ware, so there is a little bit of overlap there, but I still think ultimately for Miami, this is a really good get for them at 21 in the 2025 NBA draft. Pick number 22, the Indiana Pacers here now, and I think for Indiana, this is a very, very good pick. This is a player who isn't very beloved right now in the NBA draft community, in my opinion, but I still think has been constantly overlooked and should be a first-round pick in the 2025 draft. That is forward Alex Karaban from UConn. Talked about positional IQ, positional understanding, this most recent pick with Adu Thiero. Alex Karaban is really the epitome of that here in the 2025 NBA draft. You look back at his 3-year career with UConn. Obviously, this year I think was kind of a tougher year for him because he was cast in a role that wasn't the most comfortable for him. His freshman season, right, played alongside Jordan Hawkins, who was their primary prolific scorer. And then, last year played with Stephon Castle, played with Tristan Newton, played with Donovan Clingan. Those three guys kind of handled a bulk of the playmaking and a bulk of the offensive creation role for UConn last year. With all of those players out, which is, multiple NBA talented level players, Karaban kind of was thrusted into a role where he had to do a little bit more on the ball instead of being this connective piece. And I don't think we got to really see the best offensive version of Alex Karaban, which is an off the ball Nick Batum type of player, and not younger Nick Batum in Portland, but Nick Batum in Los Angeles with the Clippers, where, hey, he's going to stand off the slot, and if you close out on him, he's making them one extra swing pass like a veteran player should. And Karaban, to me, just screams veteran player. This guy screams 10-year career. This guy screams, hey, he's going to shoot 36 to 41% from three pretty much every single season. He's going to be a solid team defender. There was games this year. Karaban had a 7-block game early in the season, several multi-steal games, multi-block games. He has a very good wingspan for his size. He's going to be very, very beneficial for an overall team. Adding him into the mix, and specifically you think about Indiana. I talked about how kind of the loss of playmaking around him in UConn was a detriment to him. This is not going to be a problem he experiences in Indiana around Nembhard, around Halliburton, around Siakam. They have the pieces around McConnell, right? They have the pieces there that are already built to create a majority of Indiana's offense. The pace that they play with, and obviously the kind of unique offense that they can play with. Halliburton doing a little bit more off the ball this year than he did a year ago. Obviously, think about the pick and pop game that they obviously can rely on at any point in time with Turner. The ball's not going to be in Karaban's hands a lot, but when it's in his hands, they're going to be able to rely on him being a knockdown shooter, something he's obviously presented himself to be over time, and then also be someone who's going to be connective in their offense. Hey, Halliburton drove and kicked it out to you. Now, Karaban, you have to make the extra pass. He's very good at that. Karaban is just a seamless fit into pretty much any good team right now, and I think a team like Indiana would be very, very smart to pick him 22nd overall. Moving on to pick 23, the Washington Wizards have another pick now after their trades with the Memphis Grizzlies at the NBA trade deadline. I thought a very, very good move for Washington, all things considered, at the deadline. Now they have the opportunity to add a little bit more talent after grabbing Cooper Flagg first overall. 23rd overall, I have the Wizards here selecting guard Nolan Traore from France. Another player who, coming into the year, I was really looking at him being a very likely top 3, top 4 pick in this year's class, and just hasn't had the season. His overall true shooting percentage is a little bit sub 50% this year in his time professionally this year. Now, again, if you're going to be completely honest, professional basketball in a lot of ways is harder than what some of these other college kids are facing. Would Nolan Traore have had a better season if he was in Illinois instead of Kasparas Jakucionis? Probably. So you have to take in, kind of the strength of competition into kind of effect here. But I do think when you compare Jakucionis and Traore a bit, Jakucionis is a more dynamic playmaker. He's someone who I think reads the floor quicker, understands how to weaponize drop coverage a little bit better, kind of occupying the big man coming off of screens and then realizing, I have that kick out now to the pick and pop big. Traore does a really good job utilizing rollers. I think specifically with his quickness getting downhill, does still have a very good quick first step, can generate paint touches, still probably warrants a first round pick for me at this point. Now, I think there's a pretty wide spread where people have him. Some people don't have Traore as a first round pick. Other people still have him as a lottery pick, and I understand kind of the nuances and the differences, and I think he's one of the harder players to project because right now I do think the playmaking glimpses are there, the downhill element is there in terms of getting to certain spots on the floor to put team defenses in a bind, but at the same time offensively I do have questions about his overall shot making, I have questions about his overall feel for the position specifically, and if he's ever going to be good enough to supersede starting level players at the point guard spot in the NBA, and if not, then he does not warrant a lottery pick. He just doesn't. So I think specifically for me here, for a team like Washington, I would be willing to take this kind of stab for them at 23rd overall after some of the other players have been off the board, which is where I have him mocked in this one for you guys. Now, pick 24, the Atlanta Hawks here on the clock. This pick coming from the Los Angeles Lakers. Remember, 14th overall, I had them going with Egor Demin out of BYU. Now, 24th overall, I have the Hawks selecting forward Will Riley from Illinois, who has really come on as of late. It's been kind of an up and down season for Will Riley. Started the year very, very well, then had kind of a little bit of a poor stretch during the middle of the year, including losing some minutes pretty significantly for the Fighting Illini. But down the stretch of the season has come on stronger and stronger and stronger, and now probably does warrant again a first-round pick. kind of have really hovered with him in many different spots in the mock draft this year. Sometimes seeing him near the lottery, sometimes not even in the first round at all. Now here kind of in the back half of the first round at number 24. So for me, Will Riley, when you look at what Atlanta could really use, playing off the catch, that's something I think Will Riley gives them, but also gives them some more of that on-ball creation. We talked about the need for that with the Egor Demin pick. Will Riley's kind of insurance on that. He likes to get to his dribble pull-up, can really knock down perimeter shots, likes to do so in transition quite a bit, has shown the ability to score out of the pick and roll a little bit this year as well for Illinois. So I think with Will Riley specifically in mind here for Atlanta, you're looking at someone who off of Trae Young, off of Egor Demin, could thrive in that kind of role, playing off the catch and being a spot up catch and shoot type of player who can attack closeouts. But then also when you're kind of picturing him with Trae Young off the floor and maybe needing a little bit more offensive punch, Will Riley's maybe someone you can lean into a little bit more long term, being someone who's comfortable and capable attacking off the bounce, looking to get his own shot off the dribble, and I think kind of gives the best of both worlds here for Atlanta at pick number 24. Pick 25, the Orlando Magic here now. This pick coming from the Denver Nuggets. Remember, they took Noah Essengue at number 15. Now 25th overall, I have them selecting guard Bennett Stirtz out of Drake. And I want to point back to the Ty Jerome, Paulo Banchero beef from a couple of weeks ago. And Ty Jerome point blank told them, I would start on your team. And Ty Jerome wasn't wrong. Ty Jerome is one of the best ball screen players in the entire league this year. The very beginning of the year, it really caught my eye. Some of his pick and roll numbers were jumping off the charts. And I was very curious if that was going to hold true throughout the course of the season, or if that was a very small sample size situation in the first week of the season. Well, it's pretty much held true. Ty Jerome's been an awesome pick and roll player for the Cavaliers all season long. And I think for Bennett Stirtz specifically, that's what he projects to be, is a very fun pick and roll player. Now, I think there's room for him to grow still. This was, remember, his first time. This was his first season playing Division I basketball for his head coach, Ben McCollum, after following him from his Division II school the year prior. Bennett Stirtz, I think, really throughout the year, first of all, showcased a lot of comfortability against this level of competition, but also the ability to kind of rise to the occasion. Think about how many big-time shots he hit this year, certain daggers in games, huge shots to kind of swing momentum at certain points in time. And a lot of that came out of the pick and roll, came out of creation offense. And specifically what I really love about Bennett Stirtz is how he manipulates the pick and roll and how he makes sure to set himself up for success in the pick and roll. This is what really stands out to me every time I watch him. It's not just about, hey, he's going to come off the ball screen and look to score out of advantage. It's he's going to make sure that the ball screen hits, and he's going to make sure that he gets the advantage he wants out of it. Next time you watch Bennett Stirtz film, which obviously, unfortunate for them, they got bounced out of the tournament in the round of 32. Even if you go back, watch the round of 32 game, you're going to see what I'm talking about. He goes off the screen. If he doesn't get the hit he wants, he's going to back dribble once and go for a rescreen. That's part of what Ben McCollum has instilled in his Drake offense, obviously. And part of what helps Bennett Stirtz be so successful is understanding how to generate that advantage out of screen opportunities, making sure that he gets to advantage by getting a good hit at the screen level, and then playing out of that. And obviously he has the shot making chops to do that. Been very effective this year, above 60% true shooting on the season. Someone who's a very effective free throw shooter, pretty solid free throw rate, not an elite free throw rate, but a pretty solid one. Just very cerebral, smart player. Doesn't feel like he over dribbles, has total command of the offense, a very good assist to turnover rate throughout the course of the season as well. Again, in his first ever time playing Division I basketball, this is a kid who's built to succeed. He is very smart, cerebrally sound, and someone who understands how to run the pick and roll. This would be a huge benefit to Orlando. This would be a significant upgrade in the pick and roll ball handling department over everything they currently have right now. I think Bennett Stirtz at 25. This kid should be a first-round pick, and I feel really good about him going to Orlando with this selection. Pick 26, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This pick comes from the New York Knicks. Again, part of that Mikal Bridges trade. Now the 26th overall pick here for Brooklyn. After earlier going with Derek Queen and Asa Newell, we're looking for maybe some backcourt contributors, guys who can help their long-term backcourt upside moving forward. And that player here is Ben Saraf from Ratiopharm. We talked about his teammate Noah Essengue earlier at 15 for Orlando. I think this is extremely good value for the Brooklyn Nets here at number 26. Saraf, someone who kind of presents himself as a hybrid combo guard. And sometimes that's hard to project how that player is going to fit in the league. But I think for an offense like Brooklyn, who does so much out of handoffs, does so much out of, kind of unique spots of the floor in terms of the way Jordi Fernandez's offense works, Saraf is someone who, as a combo guard, can fit in pretty smoothly here because he'll be playing off of handoffs a bit. You can also factor in him running, 6 to 10 pick and rolls a game. Whatever number that ultimately ends up looking like for Jordi Fernandez, I think they're going to be able to, really functionally fit Ben Saraf in pretty smoothly here. And I think Saraf specifically for the Nets gives them someone who can be a downhill threat, gives them that playmaking bump when it comes to over-the-top passing. And that's one of my favorite things watching Ben Saraf. I talked about, with Dylan Harper, second overall, one of my favorite micro skills being his pick and roll splitting. One of my favorite micro skills is Ben Saraf jump passing over the top of defenses. He already has pretty solid positional size at about 6'6", but he does a very good job to leave his feet to throw accurate passes. Now, he's not the most precise passer. If I had one little nitpick on his game as a facilitator, I think he doesn't always hit the shooting pocket. He hits the door a lot. He's going to get it within your frame offensively, but he's not hitting the pocket super consistently. So from a developmental standpoint, I think that's something that I would harp on him with, is just getting those reps to make sure you're not only throwing the pass where you think it should go in terms of reading the defense, but trying to pinpoint that pass to where it needs to be to effectively help your shooter more consistently make shots. But nonetheless, for Saraf here at number 26 overall, I think for Brooklyn, you're getting a player who can create offense for you. I think could be a really fun combination with Derek Queen coming off of handoffs, maybe hitting him on a lob or a little short roll dump into the pocket. There's a bunch of different ways that you could try and build out your offense with Saraf and Derek Queen together. Derek Queen, if you get him 5th overall, as you can tell, it kind of really solidifies and cements what this overall draft class could look like for Brooklyn, because I think Queen can be that kind of hub of your offense, initiator into your half-court sets, and I think for Brooklyn specifically, that's really what they need yet at this point. And then the rest kind of is a domino effect from there of which players fit off of Derek Queen, which players can play well off of him, and I think Saraf is one that stands out to me as a unique fit with him moving forward. 27, we're staying on the topic here of the Brooklyn Nets. This pick now via the Houston Rockets through, swap. There's a lot of details as to how this pick got here, ultimately through deals, right? But nonetheless, Brooklyn here now with this pick, they're going to select guard Mark Sears from Alabama. Ended up being an All-American first team, somewhat interestingly. Not a lot of people agreed with that. And, some people were saying should have been Bennett, Stirtz. There was a lot of people who were saying other players deserve that All-American first team spot. But Mark Sears did have his best productive season in terms of playmaking. Now, the efficiency as a scorer dropped pretty significantly. But nonetheless, I still think Mark Sears is a player who does stand out to me as an offensive creator that does warrant a very late first-round pick in this draft class. Honestly, I'd maybe even be comfortable taking him a bit higher than number 27. I would probably start to really strongly consider him anywhere from 18 to 24, 25-ish, honestly. At this point in time, obviously, we'll see as we get through the combine who withdraws from the draft, who actually declares for the draft, right? There's still a lot that can change. But nonetheless, Mark Sears at number 27 for Brooklyn. This is their 4th first-round pick. Not every single pick has to be a 19-year-old kid, right? You're getting a little bit of an older player here, but someone who I think can really bring some stability into your backcourt, specifically probably as a backup guard very early on in his career. I think this is a good pick for Brooklyn, and he's a player who has thrived off the basketball. He's a little bit smaller, I know, but, we've seen really great college players who were smaller really thrive in the NBA, the most prominent one being Jalen Brunson in recent history. Peyton Pritchard's another good example of a smaller player who, if they can really shoot, dribble, and pass, they end up being pretty good NBA players. Mark Sears can shoot, dribble, and pass. This kid can play. He's very, very good at basketball. And I think if you're looking at number 27 overall, what should the Nets be looking for? They should be looking for good basketball players. That's exactly what Mark Sears is. I feel very, very good about this selection for Brooklyn at this spot in the draft. Pick number 28, the Boston Celtics here now. A team that obviously is still a force to be reckoned with in the NBA. They shoot the 3-ball so well when Porzingis is healthy and on his game. This team is going to be really, really, really difficult to beat, as you could imagine. They won the NBA Finals last year extremely easily, coasted through the Eastern Conference, and then demolished the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals, and at 28 now, the Celtics have the ability to add to their talent. I like their Baylor Sherman pick a lot last year. He's kind of come on as of late as well for the Celtics. Now 28th overall, I have them selecting guard Ian Jackson out of North Carolina. And I think specifically for Boston here, it's about finding a player who can kind of toggle between on-ball, off-ball responsibilities a little bit, comfortable handling the ball, but doesn't need to play in that kind of role to succeed because of how much Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown are going to handle the basketball as is, right? They're going to be playing with the ball in their hands quite a bit, being rather ball dominant. And then you look at the success of Derek White. He's such a good basketball player. Drew Holiday has kind of regressed a little bit this year in terms of his three-point shot making and some other areas of his game, but he's still a very well-rounded player. I think for Boston specifically, you're just looking at trying to get a player who's going to be a complementary piece around your core unit going forward. The recent sale of the Boston Celtics, $6.1 billion, which is just ridiculous. That 0.1 number is just absurd to even think about. That 0.1 billion could completely change your life and your kids' lives and their kids' lives and their kids' lives, right? That's how insane money is in the world right now, especially, $6.1 billion sale for a sports team is just ridiculous. But the question for the ownership group that's spending that much money to get the team is, are they willing to keep the core nucleus together? Are they willing to continue spending? Are they willing to continue locking themselves into this roster moving forward? And if the answer is yes to that, then you need players who can complement that. And I think that's what you're looking at with Ian Jackson here, as someone who has shot the ball relatively well, has pretty good physical tools and gifts to work with from an athletic component. And I think just looking for backcourt options long term for the Celtics, Ian Jackson, someone who can kind of fit that mold moving forward. Pick number 29, the Phoenix Suns here. The Suns are a very interesting team to talk about. I was actually credentialed to a Phoenix Suns game earlier this past week. It was great to see them in person play. They had a pretty huge beatdown over the Toronto Raptors I mentioned earlier. But for Phoenix, I think one thing that has been a continued point of emphasis from their stars, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and also from their coach Mike Budenholzer, is about doing the little things, finding players who can complement their star pieces, and having size, length, athleticism, rebounding, rim protection, shot deterrence on the perimeter defensively. The Suns are looking for a lot of different things. They found a very good defender last year in Ryan Dunn at the back of the first round. They also found a very productive center for them in Oso Ighodaro in the second round. So the Suns have done a good job on the margins, finding some pieces to complement that core. And I think here specifically 29th overall, they're going to try and address that again, adding another front court type player, another player with good length, size, athleticism to fit around their star nucleus of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker specifically. 29th overall, here I have the Phoenix Suns selecting Yaxel Lendeborg from UAB. And I think this player is really, really, really fascinating for the Suns here. Just recently had a 30-20 game for the UAB Blazers. He's a player that I think just does a lot of the dirty work, does a little bit of the nitty-gritty, and that's, again, been a continued message from Phoenix that they really need more players like this that can get on the glass, be active, make things happen, and do the little things. And that's been, again, the message from Devin Booker. That's been the message from Kevin Durant about what they're missing currently on their roster. Ryan Dunn does quite a bit of that in terms of the effort component defensively. And then Lendeborg as well, offensively, right? He's been a bigger than a role player for UAB. But I think when it comes to how he's going to function in Phoenix, you're looking at playing off the catch, trying to act as a cutter, diver in actions. And I think for the Suns, you're not going to address all of your needs here. I considered several different big men. I looked at maybe a point guard even, something that could be in consideration. They've been playing two-way Collin Gillespie as a starter. Tyus Jones been coming off the bench. He's on an expiring contract. So it's a really unique situation for Phoenix right now. I just don't know how this team ever really bridges the gap going forward if they don't trade Kevin Durant and if they don't trade Devin Booker. I'm sure that Durant trade will come this offseason though, so we'll see what happens. But Lendeborg is a player that I think could make some sense for the Suns, trying to put doers around their star nucleus, their star core there in the desert. At number 30 here, the Los Angeles Clippers are on the clock. This is a swap, of course, with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have the last pick in the first round. And the Clippers here take a stab on a John Calipari prospect in guard Boogie Fland from Arkansas. And I think there's been a lot of criticism around Boogie Fland, and a lot of that really stems from his shot finishing and specifically his efficiency as a scorer this year. But what I haven't really heard people talk about is his efficiency as a playmaker. He's boasting a near 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He's a really fun prospect when it comes to playmaking, coming off of pick and rolls, finding cutters, spraying the ball out to shooters. And I think for Boogie Fland specifically for the Clippers, you're looking for someone who can run your offense a bit. You know, in previous mock drafts, we've talked about Mark Sears for them. We've talked about other guards that could maybe make some sense. Bennett Stirtz would be a really great pickup for the Clippers at this pick if he were to be still available, right? He's not. So you have to find a creative way to address this problem that the Clippers have when James Harden's not on the floor for you. And I think Boogie Fland is one that maybe not only addresses that need for another floor general, playmaker, initiator of offense for them, but also maybe breathes a little bit of long-term life in terms of upside. If Boogie Fland develops and grows as a shot maker and creator, it kind of brings me back to some of my Ty Washington discussion in previous draft classes when I was talking about Ty Washington as a mid-range shot maker and pick and roll ball handler. Like Boogie Fland could turn out that way, where he's just not good enough as a shot maker, as a scorer, to really deserve or take 15 pick and roll opportunities a game. And that's a real possibility here. I'm not even sure he's going to declare for the 2025 NBA draft, which is why he's at the very back end of the first round here, because if he declares, he could still be a first round pick, but maybe he decides going back to school for another year could really help bolster his draft stock if he shoots the ball a bit better, which is a real possibility. Boogie Fland's one of the more difficult players to talk about. At times, he's been a top 10 pick in some of my mock drafts. I do think the potential is significantly seriously there for him as a scorer, as a shot maker, and specifically as a playmaker. And I think for the Clippers here specifically, you should be willing to take this kind of stab on not only a guard with upside, but a John Calipari guard with upside. The track record on John Calipari guards, funny enough, Ty Washington was one as well, is typically very good. Obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was the Clippers' most recent selection of one. He turned out to be a very good player, unfortunately for the Thunder and not for them. But overall, the Clippers, I think just if you're looking for what this roster needs, it's another playmaker. And if you're looking at what the future of this team needs, it's someone who has potential to grow into an offensive initiator for himself and others. And I think Boogie Fland, out of all the players available at this part of the mock draft, is one of the few players I would say he's at least worth taking that kind of risk on moving forward. So it's a unique, interesting position here for the Clippers, but one that I think if they did take Boogie Fland could produce some really good long-term results for them. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you guys did enjoy this mock draft Monday. It was a lot of fun putting together, recording. Hopefully you guys are enjoying March Madness as well. Let me know again in the comment section below who your favorite NBA draft prospect is. I will be leaving my little hearts on every single one of those comments in today's video. Thanks again all so much again for the patience around my family situation, the passing of my grandmother. You guys were, again, very kind, considerate, thoughtful, and from the bottom of my heart, I really do appreciate all of that from you. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.